Hi, this is Nick. Welcome to this edition of the Breeze Blog. Today we're going to answer the question, how can the Hogwarts Express make designing your presentation easier? But before we answer that question, let me ask you a question. Have you ever sat down to create a presentation and realized you felt a little lost or overwhelmed? I know I have. I remember when I first started developing presentations, a lot of times I'd feel a little lost on where to even begin. Even if I had all the information I needed and the research, the task of designing a presentation with that information seemed a little daunting at times. Now, I'm not talking about designing the actual presentation slides here. I cover that in my upcoming book, Powering Your Point, and that's a plug. What I'm talking about in this article is the overall design, the outline, the structure of the presentation, which has to come first. Now, I had a colleague once tell me that I was being a perfectionist about creating an outline for a presentation, but the fact of the matter is that your structure of your presentation matters. If your presentation's organized in a logical way, and it includes all the key components, then it'll be a success. If it's disorganized or if it misses some of those key elements, then it's going to fizzle. It's not going to have that positive impact that you want. And knowing that it matters only makes for more stress, which can make the whole process of preparing or even delivering a presentation a little unpleasant. So if you're like me, what you want is an easy way to remember how to structure your presentation to make sure it's effective, so that when you have a presentation to put together, you kind of have a template in your head that can help save time and avoid some of the frustration. At least that's what I was looking for. Then I remembered what one of my college professors did in his writing class that really helped make things easier. He gave us a template which helped us make sure all the elements of a good story or essay were present, but they were also in an effective order. He also used an analogy that really helped us remember that structure. And when it comes to simplifying things and making them easier to remember, I love analogies. And when I started applying the template and the analogy concept to my presentations, they became a lot easier and less stressful to put together, and they were ultimately more effective. So the simple analogy we're going to use is that your presentation is like a story train. You're going to really love this. By the end of this video, you're going to feel much more confident about preparing a presentation. The analogy may seem a little grade school, but if you think about it this way, it can really help you prepare your presentation. As you can see, there'll be three main parts we'll discuss today: the engine, the car, and the caboose. And obviously, this relates to the beginning, the middle, and the end that we know every story needs. And you might have already learned that it's good to use a story format for your presentation. And it is good because we're all accustomed to, and we're very good at deriving meaning from stories. So using the story format helps make sure you have all those important elements that make up a good presentation. But I like adding the analogy of the story train because it adds emphasis to an important part of the story that we sometimes spend too little time on. That's why we'll spend most of our time on that part of the train today. So what is that part of the train? Well, it's the engine. Obviously, the engine represents the introduction to your presentation, and your introduction needs to be more than a title slide, an agenda, and directions to the restroom. It needs to be really the powerhouse of your presentation. An effective engine gets them on the train, it prepares them for the journey, and it pulls them to their destination. And to do all that, it has to include certain important things. Now, we talked about the value of using a story format, and every story has 5 key elements. It has characters, setting, plot, conflict, and resolution. And when you include them briefly at the beginning of your presentation, your engine, it helps because it answers those questions that we all have in the back of our minds at the beginning of any book or movie or presentation. They're the answers to the questions all journalists know to answer, the 5 W's plus H, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. When we clue the audience into the answers to these questions, it helps engage them. It's how newspaper headlines get you to read the story. It's how movie previews get you into the theater. And it's a vital function of the engine of your story train. Now, when it comes to presentations, The answers to some of these questions seem pretty obvious, so we don't really put too much thought into them. A lot of times the answers to who, what, where, and when naturally are going to end up in our introduction and title. And the how can be previewed in an agenda if you have one, and I suggest that you do. But what I've seen many presentations miss is the most important of all the questions to answer, the why. It's the question that builds up enough power and steam in your engine to really pull the train. It's the firebox. Now, I'm not talking about why you are giving the presentation. I'm talking about the main question your audience has. We all have it, and that is, why should I pay attention to this presentation? Many times we forget to really answer that question effectively, but it's vital to an effective presentation if we want them to pay attention. Dale Carnegie, in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, says, there is only one way under high heaven to get anybody to do anything, and that is to make them want to do it. And that's what answering this why question effectively does. The good news is that the answer you need to provide to this why question is really an easy formula. Every advertiser and every effective salesperson knows exactly how to answer this question to motivate someone to listen by using this simple formula. And it's so simple, but you'll think it's genius. And it is. The formula is simply pain plus your product or your presentation equals pleasure. It's that simple. We're all motivated by the pain-pleasure principle, by moving away from pain and toward pleasure. So this is where you make sure in your engine, at the beginning of your presentation, to talk about the pain, the challenge, the struggle that your audience is already experiencing. And then you show them the pleasure they want, the solution, their desired destination. And then you preview how your presentation is what will get them there. It's that simple. So you'll want to put enough effort into the engine and make sure you answer those questions, especially that why question. Do this effectively, and you create that power you need to get the audience interested in actually boarding your train cars, physically and mentally, and begin the journey with you. And once they do board the cars, what will they find? Well, in part 2, we'll discover 2 things that we sometimes forget that will keep them on board and enjoying the ride. Until then, cheers.